The morning sun filtered through the canopy of the ancient forest as Ethan Parker made his way along the familiar trail toward the river. A canvas bag slung over his shoulder filled with medicinal herbs he had been gathering since dawn. At 28, he had spent his entire life in the small village of Cedar Falls, learning the secrets of the wilderness from his grandfather, and earning a modest living as a guide for the occasional tourists who ventured into the remote mountain region. Sound of distressed voices carried through the trees, immediately putting Ethan on alert. He quickened his pace toward the source of the commotion, emerging into a clearing where he could see the treacherous marshland that locals knew to avoid, but outsiders often stumbled into unaware. "Help! Please, someone help me!" A woman's voice called out in obvious panic. Ethan spotted her immediately. A young woman with blonde hair, probably in her mid-20s, who had become trapped in what appeared to be quicksand near the edge of the marsh. She was sinking slowly but steadily, already in up to her waist, and her struggles were only making her situation worse. "Stop moving," Ethan called out as he quickly assessed the situation. "The more you struggle, the deeper you will sink. I'm going to help you, but you need to stay as still as possible." The woman looked up at him with relief and terror warring in her eyes. "I was hiking alone and took a wrong turn. I did not realize this was dangerous ground until it was too late." Ethan could see that she was clearly not from the area, dressed in expensive hiking gear that looked like it had never seen serious outdoor use. But her circumstances were irrelevant to the immediate danger she faced. "What is your name?" Ethan asked as he quickly removed a coil of rope from his pack, testing its strength. "Charlotte," she replied, trying to control the panic in her voice. "Charlotte Morrison." Ethan noticed the slight hesitation in her response, but was too focused on the rescue to give it much thought. "Charlotte, I am Ethan. I need you to listen carefully to everything I tell you. This type of quicksand can be escaped, but only if we do this exactly right." Working with the practiced efficiency of someone who had lived his entire life in challenging wilderness conditions, Ethan secured one end of the rope around a sturdy tree and fashioned a loop in the other end. The process required him to get uncomfortably close to the edge of the dangerous ground himself. "I am going to throw you this rope," Ethan explained. "When you catch it, put it under your arms, not around your waist. Then lean back and try to float as much as possible while I pull you out slowly." "What if this does not work?" Charlotte asked, her voice shaking. "It will work," Ethan replied with calm certainty. "I have helped pull animals out of situations like this before. The key is patience and not fighting against the suction." It took nearly 30 minutes of careful, steady work, but eventually Ethan was able to extract Charlotte from the quicksand and help her to solid ground. She was covered in mud and clearly shaken by the experience, but otherwise unharmed. "I cannot believe you knew exactly what to do," Charlotte said as she tried to clean some of the mud from her expensive hiking clothes. "I thought I was going to die out here." "The wilderness can be dangerous if you do not respect it," Ethan replied, packing his rope back into his pack. "But it is also predictable if you understand how it works. That was not actually quicksand. In the traditional sense, just very soft, water-saturated soil that can trap someone who does not know how to escape." Charlotte studied his face, clearly impressed by his calm competence and the matter-of-fact way he had handled what could have been a fatal situation. "Ethan, how can I repay you for saving my life?" "No payment necessary," Ethan said simply. "Are you able to walk? I should get you back to the main trail so you can find your way to wherever you are staying." As they walked through the forest, together Charlotte learned about Ethan's life in Cedar Falls, his knowledge of wilderness survival, and his work guiding visitors through the mountain trails. Ethan learned that Charlotte was supposedly from the city, traveling alone to experience nature and get away from the pressures of her regular life. What Charlotte did not tell Ethan was that she was Charlotte Blackwood, the only daughter of tech billionaire Robert Blackwood, and that her solo hiking trip was actually an attempt to escape the suffocating world of wealth and privilege that had defined her entire existence. She had been running from bodyguards, family expectations, and a life where every relationship was complicated by her father's enormous fortune. "You really know these mountains well," Charlotte observed, as Ethan navigated them effortlessly through what seemed like pathless wilderness. "I was born here," Ethan replied. "My family has lived in these mountains for 4 generations. The land teaches you what you need to know if you pay attention to it." Charlotte found herself fascinated by Ethan's connection to the natural world and his contentment with a simple life that revolved around practical skills rather than financial gain. In her world of corporate mergers and technological innovations, she had never met anyone who seemed so genuinely at peace with their circumstances. When they reached the main trail, Charlotte was reluctant to part ways with this man who had saved her life and treated her as just another person rather than as an opportunity or a commodity. "Ethan, would you be willing to serve as my guide for the rest of my stay here?" she asked. "I obviously need someone who knows the area, and I would pay you well for your time." Ethan considered the offer. "How long are you planning to stay?" Week, maybe longer," Charlotte replied. "I am supposed to return to my job in the city, but I am finding that I like the peace and quiet here." Over the next several days, as Ethan showed Charlotte the hidden waterfalls, ancient groves, and wildlife habitats that made the region special, he found himself drawn to her intelligence, her genuine appreciation for natural beauty, and her surprising lack of the arrogance he had come to expect from wealthy city visitors. Charlotte, meanwhile, was experiencing a freedom she had never known. For the first time in her life, someone valued her for her curiosity, her willingness to learn, and her ability to appreciate experiences that could not be purchased. Ethan taught her to identify edible plants, showed her how to read weather, patterns in cloud formations, and shared the folklore that had been passed down through generations of mountain families. "I have never met anyone quite like you," Charlotte said one evening as they sat by a campfire, watching stars become visible in the darkening sky. "What do you mean?" Ethan asked. "You seem to have everything you need," Charlotte replied thoughtfully. "Most people I know are always striving for more money, more success, more recognition. But you seem genuinely content with your life exactly as it is." Ethan was quiet for a moment before responding. "I think contentment comes from understanding what actually matters. I have good health, meaningful work, a community that cares about me, and the mountains that have been my home since I was born. What more does a person really need?" Charlotte felt something shift in her chest as she processed his words. She had spent her entire life surrounded by people who were never satisfied, no matter how much they accumulated, and here was someone who had found peace with what most of her acquaintances would consider poverty. On the last day of her planned stay, Charlotte made a decision that surprised even herself. "Ethan, I need to tell you something," she said as they stood on a ridge overlooking the valley where Cedar Falls was nestled. "I have not been entirely honest with you about who I am." Ethan waited for her to continue, though he had suspected. There was more to Charlotte's story than she had initially shared. "My real name is Charlotte Blackwood. My father is Robert Blackwood, the CEO of Blackwood Technologies. I am supposed to be the heir to a fortune worth several $billion." Ethan stared at her, processing this revelation. "You are a billionaire?" "Technically. My father is the billionaire. I am just someone who ran away from a life that felt like it was suffocating me," Charlotte replied. "I came here to escape all of that, and instead, I found something I did not know I was looking for." "What is that?" Ethan asked. "I found someone who sees me as just Charlotte, not as Charlotte Blackwood, the billionaire's daughter. Someone who values the person I am rather than the fortune I stand to inherit." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "Charlotte, what are you really saying?" "I am saying that I do not want to go back to that life," Charlotte replied. "I am saying that this week with you has shown me what it feels like to be valued for who I am, rather than what I represent. I am asking if there might be a place for me here, in your world, if I choose to give up mine." Ethan looked at this woman, who was offering to trade billions of dollars for a life of simplicity in a mountain village, and realized that the most valuable thing about her had nothing to do with her family's wealth. "Charlotte, are you sure you understand what you would be giving up?" "I understand that I would be giving up a life that never felt like it belonged to me," Charlotte replied. "And I would be choosing a life where I could wake up every morning, knowing that the person beside me loves me for who I am, not for what I can provide. 6 months later, Charlotte had legally changed her name, renounced her inheritance, and become a permanent resident of Cedar Falls. She worked alongside Ethan as a wilderness guide and had discovered talents she never knew she possessed for sustainable living and environmental conservation. "Do you ever regret your decision?" Ethan asked one evening as they watched the sunset from their small cabin. Charlotte smiled, looking at the life they had built together through their own efforts and mutual love. "I gave up billions of dollars and gained something priceless, the knowledge that I am loved for exactly who I am. That seems like the best trade I could have possibly made." Sometimes the most valuable rescues are not the ones that pull us out of quicksand, but the ones that pull us out of lives that were never really our own and into the arms of people who see our true worth.